Well, I'm here today to talk about the experience that I've had losing my brother who took his own life 20 years ago, and really gives me the opportunity to support a campaign which I think is incredibly important and I believe passionately in, which is stopping male suicide, and raising the profile of this as a major challenge for us, and giving an opportunity for people to talk about it much more openly than was certainly the case 20 years ago when he took his life. It was nearly 20, actually it was over 20 years ago now. It was 1997, Boxing Day 1997, and he was 32 or 33 at the time of his death. He had schizophrenia for about 11 years, so it's quite a long history of mental illness. My childhood memories of him, he was a couple of years older than me, as I was the youngest of three. And of course, when you're a child, you don't know, what's before you is your reality, so you don't question that really. And he was always just a little bit different, but more importantly, he was always the one that was picked on and bullied at school. But nothing particularly unusual other than that. And then 21, he was diagnosed as schizophrenic, and was an inpatient on diagnosis for a while, which he was very traumatic for everyone involved, and he found particularly upsetting, and of course eventually was discharged and was on medication, but the medication he found to be quite difficult to manage, the side effects of particularly weight gain and tremors. So he would periodically take himself off it, and then go through severe periods of I suppose delusions really, and that in fact had manifested itself with probably through those 10, 11 years he had been admitted maybe 2 or 3 times as an inpatient, and he did. I certainly remember him attempting his life at least once before, quite a few years before, but the family at the time almost regarded that as comedic in its approach, because he just lay down in the road, and so we didn't take it seriously. We treated that as a part of the illness, really, just a symptom of the illness that he was suffering from. He lived independently. He lived in his own flat, but functional. He wasn't able to work again after he was diagnosed. So he struggled at that point. So he was on his own, and I think there was loneliness that came with that. But I think also the illness itself, did cloud in on him from time to time. But he was particularly close to physically and also, I guess, emotionally to my mother. So she was the one who, if you like, who was the one who bore the brunt in terms of managing his condition and providing support over a number of years, whilst my eldest brother and I and my father were more distant, and therefore more physically distant and emotionally distant, I suppose, from it. In the weeks leading up to his death, he'd experienced a betrayal by some people who he thought were friends, some people he'd come to know, who had abused his trust, and that had hit him very, very badly. So he was in quite a dark place from that. But for us as family, no, not necessarily any darker than we had seen or experienced in over the previous 10, 11 years. So actually leading up to his death, there was no particular signals or warning signs for us that we could see. It was, as I say, it was on Boxing Day. So in fact, I had suggested that he come to Guernsey for Christmas. He lived in the UK, and he didn't particularly want to. He wanted to be on his own. And I spoke to him on Christmas Day, but it was a very normal conversation, and to the extent that the conversations with him were normal. They had a pattern which was normal. So no, there was, and other, obviously other members of the family had done the same as well. So there was no particular signal that we picked up, and of course, that was one of the questions you ask yourself is, should we, or what did we miss? What could we have seen? I was advised around about the middle of the morning on Boxing Day. The police had been to see my father, who lived in Guernsey, from somebody who had found my brother. So my mother, who was elsewhere, had been notified as well. So I was called, and yes, profound shock and surprise, but because really no expectation that this was on the cards or was an outcome that we could have expected. So I think from my perspective, experiencing it as family, I saw it through two prisms, I suppose. I saw it through my own eyes as a sibling. What it was like to lose a sibling in that way, but I also saw how it affected my parents, and I think my father in particular, who died 9 years ago. I don't think he ever really came to terms with it. It was something that he was, I think, felt profound guilt that he had been unable to help, or hadn't been as good a father as perhaps he would have liked to have been, and felt that perhaps in some way he could or should have been able to do more. So I think it affected him profoundly, and I think for me, it wasn't until I had my own children that I could really have a deeper understanding of what that sense of loss of a child is for a parent. And as a parent, you can only imagine going there in your head. It's a place you never want to be, and I think seeing my parents in that place gave an inkling as to what an awful experience it is for any parent to lose a child. So I think it was also, yes, for me, undoubtedly a feeling of guilt, a feeling of again, could I have done more? Should I have insisted he come to Guernsey? Should I have? Could I have spent more time with him? Could I have been less irritated by some of the conversations we had, and could I have not wanted to finish the phone call to get on with the rest of my life, which was something that I had felt, and undoubtedly that knowing that wasn't going to be something that you were going to be bothered with again was a strange kind of loss, really. So but I think. And yes, to some extent, I suppose because he had such a profound mental illness with schizophrenia, which had been diagnosed and was being managed, there were probably less questions as to why, because in a sense it's an illness that defies being able to provide a rational answer to those questions by the nature of the illness. But I think there were some questions as to, well, why now, and what had there been a particular trigger? Was it this incident that he'd had a few weeks earlier with his friends, or was it something else? So I think perhaps in that sense we as a family were less bothered by that question that might well impact on many others. I think just to talk to whoever you feel comfortable talking to, whether it's the individual, whether it's the people around the individual, their friends, their family, whether it's other members of your own family, your partner, whoever you are most comfortable with discussing something that is concerning you so profoundly about an individual, just talk to somebody. They may be feeling the same. They may have seen something else. They may be able to guide you to somebody else who can help. So I think that would be my key message is don't sit on your own concerns, but do something with them.